Good morning, everybody. While we get started, we will go ahead and ask you guys, please mute your microphones, and we will give a little bit more time for the others to join, and we'll get started here in a quick moment. We just have a few more trickling in right now. All right, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll keep admitting folks as they sign on. Good morning, everybody. My name is John Palmer. I'm the Services Director here with Volunteer Florida. I'd like to welcome you all to our Service Enterprise Informational Meeting. Before we get started, as I mentioned, please mute your microphones. This recorded session will be available on our website later this afternoon. Feel free to check it out and, of course, share it with your friends and colleagues. The more the merrier. We're super excited to have you all aboard, and we'll get started. So before I hand this over to Ms. Beth, just a little bit for the Volunteer Florida side. Volunteer Florida, we see more than just service enterprise. We'd like to help showcase your organization, your opportunities. If you haven't yet, feel free to utilize Volunteer Connect. It is the state's official hub for volunteerism. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything like that, feel free to let me know. My contact information will be later provided at the end of this slideshow. With that in mind, I will go ahead and hand this session over to Beth Steinhorn, and we will get this informational meeting underway. Beth.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. And to my colleagues at Volunteer Florida, I just want to make sure that the recording is going. Okay, super. Well, great. Well, welcome, everyone. What a wonderful large group that's participating today. And to those who are watching this via recording, welcome as well. This is an informational session about service enterprise and opportunities that are being offered by Volunteer Florida to help you, as presumably a Florida-based nonprofit or community organization or local government, to increase your impact through volunteer engagement. I will do a quick introduction of myself, and while I'm doing that, I invite you as well, if you're able and if you're inspired, to just share what organization and location you represent in the chat, and maybe consider adding one thing you hope to achieve by engaging volunteers more strategically. We have almost three dozen people on the call today, so I'm not going to read them all aloud, but I'd love to get a sense of who's in the room and what organizations you represent, and also where you might see opportunities to increase impact through engaging volunteers even more strategically. As you're doing that, I'll follow up on John's welcome and just introduce myself. I'm Beth Steinhorn. I'm president of VQ Volunteer Strategies. We work with organizations all around the country to help them increase impact by engaging volunteers more effectively. And I'm thrilled to once again be partnering with Volunteer Florida to deliver this initiative known as Service Enterprise. I am a national trainer and also, as I've mentioned, partner with Volunteer Florida in delivering service enterprise, which by the end of today's session, you'll have a good sense of what this program is. Our goals for today are to give you a sense of what the service enterprise program is, as well as the research that backs this research-based initiative. We're going to hear from one of your colleagues, Lorena Milkey from Seniors in Service of Tampa, who is who represents an accredited service enterprise in Florida. So thank you, Lorena, for being here and for sharing your story. And then we'll make sure that you understand the benefits of pursuing service enterprise accreditation and give you the information you need to determine if this is right for you and your organization at this time. We'll leave you with the specific next steps and we'll have time to answer questions. I invite you to ask questions throughout in the chat. If I'm able to answer it in the moment because it relates to what I'm talking about, I will do so. If not, I might skip it because I know I'm going to be getting to that information. But regardless, including if I miss things, despite my ability to multitask, I will absolutely give a chance at the end for Q&A. So thanks to everyone who's been sharing where you're from and what organizations you represent. It looks like there are quite a few from all around the state. And I see a couple people saying what you might be interested in. Mostly it's about your missions and organizations. So maybe you can be pondering that question on your own. What could be possible if you engaged volunteers even more strategically than you already do? And that gets to our opening question here, which is, what is strategic volunteer engagement? What am I talking about? And what do we talk about in the field when we use the phrase strategic volunteer engagement? In essence, what we're talking about is ensuring that all efforts to engage volunteers are mission-centered. So there is a clear dotted line or even a big thick line between whatever actions volunteers take on behalf of your organization and how that drives success on your mission. Second, strategic volunteer engagement takes a financial and resource investment. Despite the fact that volunteers give their time freely, it is not free to engage them. So what do we need to invest in terms of money, staff time, space, equipment, training in order to effectively support volunteers? And the third piece is that it takes intentional community activation, meaning we don't just engage volunteers in work because we've always done it that way. We actually think about how we engage community members in our mission. We're intentional about the practices that support it. And that's really at the heart of the Service Enterprise Initiative. The Service Enterprise Program, which is run on a day-to-day basis by ALIVE, the Association for Leaders in Volunteer Engagement, which is the National Association of Professionals who work in volunteer engagement. We in Service Enterprise break strategic volunteer engagement down into 12 research-based characteristics, which I'll talk about in more detail later in today's webinar. But you can see how these things align with that definition of volunteer engagement, that our strategic volunteer engagement that I just gave. There's a foundation that is mission aligned. There's a foundation that involves investment of technology, resources, leadership involvement. There are practices that make for the effective activation and mobilization of community members. And then there's mission-aligned impacts and outcomes. And the benefits of embracing and putting into practice a critical number of these 12 characteristics are really multifold. We know that when organizations meet some minimum standards of their practices in volunteer engagement, they have greater capacity to address community needs because they're tapping into volunteers' strategically, thoughtfully, and effectively. This whole program is rooted in research. It's rooted in research. It's been successful because it was built and continues to be shaped by ongoing research. The initiative was first designed around 2010, 2011. It was piloted throughout the state of California around 2012. By 2014, it had rolled out nationally in partnership with Points of Light. And it was based on research conducted by a number of different researchers focusing on organizational and nonprofit practices, culture, and engagement. And we continue to gather research and evolve the program using insights from that research and the diagnostics, which I'll talk to you about. So what are just a couple of the pieces of research that were the tipping points for developing this initiative and continuing to sustain it over the last almost 15 years? First, it showed that organizations who were top performers in volunteer management 15 years ago or so were only 11% of nonprofits in the country. And the researchers went on to say, well, if only 11% of organizations really embrace best practices in volunteer engagement, do they outperform other organizations who don't embrace best practices? And what they found was, in fact, they do on multiple different measures. All capacities are stronger: financial, technological, leadership, when we engage volunteers well. We outperform organizations and do so by stewarding our resources better at half the median budget of organizations that don't engage volunteers. And this is the one that I think is most compelling, is that organizations that embrace these practices are more adaptable, sustainable, and scalable as an organization. And that we've seen continue to bear out despite economic challenges, a global pandemic, funding shifts, that when we do volunteer engagement well and think about it as a strategy, not just as a program, we are well positioned to survive disruptions in the landscape in which our organizations work. So how does the program do that? It's really focused on change management. This is not a volunteer management 101 program. There are lots of them out there, and John and I would be happy to share resources. This is an organizational change management initiative designed to establish and strengthen processes and systems to ensure that your organization can, yes, effectively manage volunteers, but also integrate them throughout multiple aspects of your operations. This theory of change approach uses it's, as I said, different from traditional volunteer management. While that's important, service enterprise instead provides a framework and support for organizations to lead a change management effort, building a culture of organizational support and structure for effective volunteering. We do that through a comprehensive diagnostic, change management training around strategic volunteer engagement, individualized coaching, ultimately accreditation, and then you're part of a national peer network as well as a statewide network in Florida of other accredited organizations. I'm going to go into greater depth about these steps in a few minutes, but I want to share with you that this is not just, a national program that's been around for almost 15 years, but what we're trying to launch today and what we're excited to have such great attendance for is the application process for the state of Florida's third cohort. The first Volunteer Florida cohort was implemented in 2022 and 23, and you can see the organizations that went through that process and are now accredited service enterprises. There were a few humane societies and animal welfare shelters prior to 2022 that were accredited as well in the state, just by a different organization, but they're organizations like Peggy Adams Animal Rescue, and a few others, Jacksonville Humane Society, a number of others were accredited before, but the main cohorts were in 2022-23, and we're just in the process of bringing the next cohort home that includes First Coast No More Homeless Pets, Global Empowerment Mission, Jacksonville Humane's reaccreditation, Ridge Area ARC, and Safe Families for Children, as well as STEMs for Girls. So you wouldn't be the first in Florida, but you would be joining an esteemed group that would really, that have already seen the benefits of pursuing service enterprise, being able to outperform others in organizational capacity, building your human resource capacity. Yes, many also do increase volunteer hours. In my mind, even more importantly, volunteer impact, utilization of skilled volunteers, all at the purpose in the service of addressing community needs. We see that 80% of service enterprises report increase in both general volunteers and skills-based volunteers. And to me, that's really all about our ability to address needs by building capacity to fundamentally integrate volunteers throughout your operations. And at a time when many organizations are facing funding challenges, thinking about how you steward your resources effectively, in my view, there's no better time than now to do that by looking at how we can effectively engage volunteers, not just as a program that's nice to have, but as a strategic function across the organization. So what does this look like from the sake of from the perspective of one of your peers? I'm so happy that we have Lorena on the call today, representing one of the organizations that was accredited in the first cohort. So Lorena, could you introduce yourself and share a little bit about the Seniors in Service journey? And I would invite anyone from the participant list, any of our attendees, to add questions for Lorena now into the chat if you have them. Happy to have Lorena stay, but she may not stay for the whole program. So Lorena, I turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lorena Milkey, and I'm with Seniors in Service. And we completed this, like as you saw, with the 22-23 cohort. What Seniors in Service does, so we're based in Tampa Bay, and we're the senior volunteer people. To give you a little bit of context, our mission is to provide solutions to community challenges by engaging volunteers, primarily those 55, and we say and better, or 55 and older. We have a couple of programs that are 18 and over. Most of our programs are senior based. And so when the opportunity to do this with Service Enterprise came along, it was very relevant to us, our organization, and to our team, because we really wanted to take advantage of this kind of inward reflection opportunity and task to see if we were hitting the mark on a lot of these items. What was most helpful to us is that, as Beth mentioned, there's these 12 key characteristics. And I think in any organization, company, program, you want to be kind of forward thinking and really visionary thinking on how can I make this better? How can I increase my impact? How can I scale my organization better? And what this framework provided us, like on a platter, was the way to do that, the way to evaluate and reflect on our own practices with, all of the research and all of this evidence-based research that comes along with it, because we didn't necessarily have all of that information. And so between all of those 12 characteristics, which I'm sure you'll go over, but, for example, there's like the funding, resource allocation, leadership support. It not only gives those, key components to look at, but then it also gives kind of detailed examples of how to look into your own funding and resource allocation and leadership support. So for our organization, one thing that was helpful, truthfully, is to be able to acknowledge where we're doing great and where we're hitting the mark, and where we were able to say like, oh, wow, like we're really strong in outreach and we're really strong in leadership support. And I think in our onboarding and training. And then so that was helpful to say like, okay, your team, like we've put a lot of time and effort and just thought and intention on these items. And somebody else can say to us, yeah, this is looking good. You guys are, well ahead of on that. And then it's also helpful to look at the other areas. So like technology and communication, we're a nonprofit. We are not very technologically savvy, and not, we're very outdated 100%. So that was an area that we really wanted to dive into, but we also needed and wanted the help to dive into it, because that was one that we were like, we know we're outdated. We know that. I don't know where to start. Like, I don't know where to go with this knowledge of, okay, we're outdated. We're way too large for the systems that we're still using. So it was helpful to, be able to, yes, like kind of see where we landed on all of these components, on the characteristics. And then furthermore, I think from there was the coaching, because then we could say specifically, like, hey, Beth, we know our technology and communications, the way that we do, we utilize that is not up to speed on how large we are. We're a staff of about 30 staff members, but we have about 2,000 volunteers across Tampa Bay. So we're large and we're using like emails and Excel spreadsheets, and we were like, we need help. And so to have that feedback, to have the network, to be able to provide, kind of things within our price range or help with like funding opportunities to then challenge our technologically kind of where we are there. All of that was really helpful, that it just gave us the guidance and like a good first step on what should we do with the areas that we already know we need improvement on. So those two pieces were really helpful. And it's helpful to also be able to say like, good job on these items, because we all need a little bit of like a pat on the back. We don't want it to be motivating. So I very much felt like we got both components in our service enterprise journey. And then I wanted to share kind of these like two key takeaways that were like really developed action items that we've continued since completing our service enterprise accreditation. So one of those was that around like the leadership support was really strong for us, and like our team culture and how we collaborate and communicate really internally was strong. But where we found a little bit of a lack was that it fell primarily on like our leadership team, our directors and our managers to do or to, initiate a lot of our team like strategic planning sessions or even team bonding things like activities. And we've heard more and more how like, just like having a collaborative team and team who knows each other, yes, work-wise, but also a little bit personal, is helpful. And it really makes you show up as your full self to work. And so one thing that we've implemented since our service enterprise accreditation and continued is that we have this quarterly rotation basically of two. We'll partner up. We have two people and it's by volunteers. Like, we don't assign people when they're going to do it, but we ask for two volunteers for the next 4 quarters. So we like lay it out for the full calendar year. And then that pair of team members put together a team activity. And it can be strategic planning. It can be outsourced from, they find a trainer that they want to bring over to our team and talk about whatever topic like that, those two agree on. It can be more fun. So we've continued that. So every 3 months we have a pair of team members do that. Most recently, I think it was like 2 weeks ago. It's very recent. We actually went to a place here in Tampa, whoever's local to Tampa, called the Game Show spot, the game show place, something like that. And it was like it was pure fun. It was not strategic planning at all, but they divided us into two teams, and it was like all the game show like on TV that you could think of. So we did like a version of like Family Feud and the pyramid game and different trivia, and it was very like it took everybody kind of out of their box, out of their like own brain, and just into a like totally new environment for all of us. No one on our team had ever done that before. So it was like a very cool, different thing for a team to do. It was led by one of our coordinators and one manager who partnered up, and they're able to bring their own flavor into all of it. So that's just a new way for us to like expand like leadership opportunities and event planning opportunities kind of to all of our staff. And it really has helped cultivate even more kind of collaboration and communication within our team. So that's one. And then I might be going long, but my second one that I really did want to share was that we've launched really officially, and it all started with our service enterprise journey here, our ambassador program. And so what that looks like is, as I stated before, seniors in service, we're the senior volunteer people. We have 2,000 like we're very volunteer focused as it is. And one thing that we learned here was that we could be, like I think you said this just right now, like looking more for intentionally for skills-based volunteers. So not just to serve in our programs and do the tutoring, mentoring with kiddos or in-home companionship, like all of those things do need to get done. but how can they, be more of a strategic mind in our organization? So we now have 20 active ambassadors. That's our ambassador program. We did complete create a full training onboarding program for our ambassadors. They do get certified at the end of it. And now our ambassadors they're really like staff members. Like it's hard to even say who is who. They do outreach in our community with like different tabling events and like bingos and different activities that we do in the goal of volunteer recruitment for our other programs. Mr. Peter is at our office like Monday through Thursday, and he's our front desk kind of manager, and he helped really greatly when we recently received a grant for some improvements or like updates in our offices. So we got like new flooring and new fans put in or new lighting put in, and he managed the whole thing. Like he had the budget, he found the vendors, I mean, he was such a huge help. Yeah, so our 20 ambassadors, like you can call them up and they really support our organization and our mission. I would say basically at the level of a staff member. And so the training has been really helpful for that. And we really only see that program growing. Some of the ambassadors have brought on like their spouse or their friend or their neighbor, and that's how our ambassadorship has kind of grown. And so all of that has really helped us, strengthen our processes, strengthen our own kind of capacity, and have greater outreach.
Thank you, Lorena. It's so valuable to hear it from someone who's been through the program. And while I share a couple thoughts, I do want to again invite participants to put any questions for Lorena and Seniors in Service specifically in the chat. And I also want to reassure that I'm going to talk about this more in a moment, that if you're sitting there thinking, well, we don't have anything close to 2,000 volunteers, we only have 3 staff or no staff, how is this program right for us? The answer is yes, it's very scalable, and I'll share more about that. And you also might be thinking, well, what if we just, that technology piece sounds amazing, but what if we don't think we have a budget for that? Again, the process is designed through your diagnostic first to identify where do you have strengths, as Lorena mentioned, and where are there opportunities, then through training to as a full cohort, to identify what are some possible areas to build up or shift that work for you as an organization. And then through individualized coaching, the team and me as the facilitator, along with John as my partner in this from Volunteer Florida, we can help you determine what's the right project for you to embark on. And even if through the course of this 12 to 18 month program, you don't get it completed, accreditation recognizes what plans you have in place. So you might be able to put in place some ideas about how you might improve technology or another area. And even if you haven't fully implemented it all, we recognize that you have the strategy and the intention and can still award accreditation with those plans in place. In fact, as anyone who's been through training with me knows, I prefer to recommend organizations for accreditation if their action plan isn't complete, because a commitment to continuous improvement is part of this whole endeavor. And in that, Lorena, I'll ask you one quick question. It sounds like since you were accredited a few years back, certainly remember the ambassador program being a core new idea and an outcome. So how has that shifted from when you were first accredited to now? You talked a little bit about growth, or are there other things that have happened post accreditation that just keeps this commitment to service enterprise alive at Seniors in Service?
Definitely. Our ambassador program, like you mentioned, it was at like its very beginning baby stages when we first started our journey with Service Enterprise. And so we didn't have any ambassadors. We had a dream of, I want to say 5 or maybe 6 ambassadors.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, like start realistic. It's okay. And so so that's really grown. And I mean, now we've presented on like the AmeriCorps Seniors National Conference twice, kind of a part 1 and then a part 2 on our ambassador program, because especially for other like service or like volunteer led organizations like ours that are really like, our whole mission is to engage volunteers. We just thought that like the ambassador idea program is just so valuable. So we've tried to not only grow our ambassador program, but also share. I mean, when we like don't gatekeep anything, like here's all the training materials that we use. This is the schedule. This is our whole agenda. These are the videos. I mean, we've just like given this over because it's been so great for us. And it's really, I want to say this also that like it's so impactful also for the volunteers. Like our volunteers come with such
Mm,
wealth of like talents and skills and just knowledge, and to give somebody the opportunity to utilize all of that is also like maybe even more important than the work that they do with us. It's like the work that they do for themselves. So, and we hear that over and over and over. So I just want to share that like when you're
thank you.
giving someone the opportunity to volunteer, you're really giving them such a gift. Like it's so important. And then beyond that, kind of other initiatives that we've had, we take a good look now of like taking a step back, getting more feedback from our volunteers and from our participants, and not just saying, oh, we have funding for this or there's an open grant for this, let's apply, but hearing the need, and then making sure that the need is fitting in with maybe what new grant applications are allowing. So since then, as an example, we've launched, it's very small scale still, but we've launched a driving program that was very
Nice.
difficult for us because there's a lot of liability insurance that comes with volunteers driving that we've just never had the capacity for. And so now we have a very small scale driving program in South Shore, like in Sun City Center in the Tampa Bay area, where our volunteers can provide transportation to participants specifically for medical appointments. Like that's where we've started. And so that's kind of been part of our service
Nice.
enterprise learnings as well, is getting more, reaching out for more intentional feedback from participants and volunteers, and then responding to the need.
Thank you. Rebecca has a question that I'll take a stab at answering, and Lorena, you're welcome to weigh in. And then I think we'll kind of move forward with the details and nuts and bolts of the program. But Rebecca asks, how do organizations going through this program balance paid positions versus volunteer positions? So it's as I'll share momentarily, it's a 7-session training program, all virtual, about 2 hours each. And it's sessions, I think it's C and D or whatever, midway through, we have a couple sessions that focus very specifically on how do we leverage the assets that we have to support paid staff to improve our volunteer systems as well. And how can we engage, as Lorena mentioned, skilled volunteers to free staff up to do the work for which they're uniquely qualified. So we look at it through 2 different directions. What can we build on from systems, onboarding, handbooks, et cetera, that we might have for paid staff, and apply that to some of to improve our systems for engaging and supporting volunteers? And alternatively, what are their roles and ways that volunteers can bring their skills and time and free staff up to do work for which they're uniquely qualified? We do not advocate for replacing staff with volunteers. In fact, we share a lot of language in the program about why this is exactly the opposite of that. So we name it. We talk about the potential fear that staff have of being replaced by volunteers, and instead talk about the change management and get people to think differently about how to engage volunteers, even for their skills, to complement and build capacity. It views paid positions as that could be engaging volunteers as a growth opportunity for them with management skills. And also, we talk a lot about training of staff to engage volunteers effectively. So while we don't provide through Service Enterprise any legal consultation around labor law, we provide a lot of strategic information to help people balance. Hopefully that gives you some insight, Rebecca, to your question. Lorena, do you have anything you want to add before we move forward?
No, just thank you so much for inviting me in. This was great. I am gonna leave a little bit because I have an open house with one of our schools to attend
There you go.
by 1 o'clock, but I'll stay on for a little bit.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate your insights. And to the point about that I started going down the road of before, like Is this right for organizations, even if you don't have 30 staff and 2,000 volunteers? I want to share that we have trained and accredited across the country many organizations, and are even working with some in Florida right now that are all volunteer-led. So I figure it's probably hot there. I'll give a little wintry scene here about an organization from the Midwest, Tasia Blue Rescue, which at the time that we trained and accredited them, obviously not through Volunteer Florida, outside of Florida, but they were an all volunteer run organization focusing on rescuing large breeds from shelters, since often they're the hardest to adopt. And afterwards, their then executive director, who was a volunteer, shared a really interesting statement, which said, we've been able to increase, this was thanks to Service Enterprise, the number of dogs we're saving from area shelters by 78% because we're more effectively engaging volunteers and being efficient with our resources. They didn't increase the number of foster volunteers. Instead, by shoring up their systems, they were able to reduce the time that dogs remain in their care because they defined volunteer roles, they made their processes more efficient, and because of that, they were able to get dogs into homes more quickly and save more lives. So again, even all volunteer-run organizations can increase their impact significantly by approaching volunteer engagement more strategically, and success can come not only in increasing numbers of volunteers, but rather improving the systems. And this was directly as a result of their service enterprise endeavor. So let's get into the details of this upcoming cohort, what's involved, what's the timeline, et cetera. This is an application. We ask for an application to be completed. We only have so much capacity. We also want to assess an organization's readiness for service enterprise, just to make sure that you're well positioned for success. And if there's another program that Volunteer Florida or another organization offers that can help you, we might be able to also offer that. So applications, and we'll share the link for that shortly. Applications are due the end of this month. We will notify organizations by mid-September if they've been accepted into the cohort. And then we hit the ground running in October, where, and I'll talk about what you're committed to, but it would be a team. This is not a one-person endeavor. You need a team of at least 3 individuals from your organization. We'll talk about that composition in a moment. So the team needs to participate with the full cohort in an orientation in October, on October 7th, so 2 months from today. And then you embark on conducting your diagnostic, which is an online survey in October and November. And we schedule between your team and me and John a 2-hour debrief of that diagnostic so that you're ready with your basic assessment, your snapshot of where your organization sits as it measures up against research-based best practices in volunteer engagement. And then there are training sessions throughout January to April, which are 7 2-hour virtual sessions, highly participatory, that we expect your team to participate in. Following the completion of the 7 training sessions, we have May through December, where there are one-to-one coaching calls with me and the team, or me and John and the team, and we get you ready for accreditation, which we hope to achieve by the end of December of 2026. Technically, the initiative provides 24 months from your orientation to complete your accreditation. But generally it's about a 12 to 16-month process. So that's the timeline. I see Anita asks, how many organizations do we plan to accept? And I would say generally, I don't know that there's a set number, but generally we're looking at between 5 and 8. And John, if you want to weigh in on that, but I think that's generally what we're looking for. So again, and there was another question earlier. What additional services can we provide to an organization with systems that handle, I'll take that question, Michelle, a little later. Let me try and remember to make a note of that. So let's talk again about, let's just walk through some of the details so you can get a sense of what the diagnostic and the accreditation process entail. So as I've mentioned, a service enterprise, well, I don't know if I've actually used these words. A service enterprise is technically defined as an organization that fundamentally leverages volunteers and their skills to achieve its social mission. To me, I'm a very visual thinker. So to me, what that really means is that if you picture your organization's org chart, volunteers are not just one branch off to the side. There are volunteers sprinkled, not just at the board level and in some direct service, but throughout the whole organization, throughout the whole org chart. And this accreditation program, which is a nationally recognized accreditation program, recognizes organizations that have moved volunteer engagement from that programmatic mindset to be a deeply integrated strategy. So it shows up in their strategic plan. There are volunteers, as Lorena mentioned, perhaps managing a renovation project, or project managing a home build, or helping with your marketing plan, as well as delivering direct services. And how does that show up? It really shows up in these 12 research-based characteristics that originally began as 8 and then 10, and now with 15 years of research, we've expanded them about 4 years ago into 12 characteristics. We divide these 12 characteristics into 3 domains: establishing the foundation, best practices in volunteer engagement, and impact and outcomes. In order to become, so these characteristics, which I'll walk through in a little more detail, are each of the areas that the diagnostic measures and provides feedback on. So you get a full report with these 12 characteristics. Plus, it becomes the backbone of a lot of the training and coaching, and ultimately is the way that your service enterprise action plan is designed, which becomes a key piece in your accreditation. In order to become an accredited service enterprise, organizations must demonstrate excellence and proficiency in 9 of these 12. So you don't have to do all of them. I've worked with small municipalities who've said, oh, fund development, we have funding and resource allocation. We don't need to do fundraising. So let's skip that one and maybe we'll do a different one. So there are ways that you can sort of tailor this. So let's just talk a little bit about the 3 domains to give you a sense of and I think this might also help the question that came up earlier about what other services for large organizations, Michelle's question. And we'll touch on some of those different pieces and how it relates to large and small organizations. So establishing the foundation is all about creating and sustaining the appropriate groundwork and underpinnings that are necessary to ensure successful engagement of volunteers. In this area, you get diagnostic scores and also training around how do we tap into funding opportunities and allocate resources like staff time, equipment, space? What about technology, as Lorena mentioned, not just for tracking outcomes and volunteer hours, although that's a piece of it, but also for communications and engaging volunteers virtually. How is leadership involved? Not just your CEO, though that's a piece of it, but also how do we engage volunteer leaders and board members? And how do department managers lead in a volunteer engagement strategy? And then my favorite, planning. Does volunteer engagement show up in your strategic plan? Are we thoughtful and planful around how we develop new volunteer roles, or are we just doing them because we've done it that way for years and years? The next domain is best practices in volunteer engagement. This is the closest service enterprise comes to Volunteer Management 101, and it focuses on these basic best practices in volunteer engagement: recruitment, onboarding, training, and supervision and support. The key piece here that I think most often surprises organizations is that training is not just about training volunteers, it's also about training the staff who engage and support them, which is why more often than not, training comes back as a surprisingly low score for many organizations, because they may do really great when they're training volunteers, but they haven't yet incorporated volunteer engagement into staff training in a regular basis. And the last piece before we kind of move to expectations and logistics is impact and outcomes. And this is all about how do you partner with other organizations in the community? That's collaboration. How do we communicate internally and externally about the impacts that volunteers have? How do we commit to growth and change? And ultimately, how do we reveal beyond just ours the real impact that volunteers have on our mission and on our community? So what are the expectations of participating in service enterprise? The expectation is that you develop a team of at least 3 individuals who are committed to participating in pretty much all of these particular sessions. And that is the orientation on October 7th, participate in the diagnostic, and you're invited and encouraged and in some cases required to have additional people take the diagnostic, and then have a one-on-one team and me and John, 2-hour debrief session, 16 hours of training, which it's actually 4, if you count the orientation, it's 16 hours, but it's 7 2-hour training sessions that are all virtual, 7 2-hour training sessions, so 14 hours total, plus 5 1-hour coaching calls, which we can schedule at your convenience. You become a member in this peer network with organizations across Florida and beyond, and access to ongoing research and resources. And of course, the biggest expectation is the chance to increase your capacity to achieve mission. You are required to create a core team of at least 3 people who will participate in the orientation, debrief, training, and most coaching sessions. Plus, there's a 2-hour virtual site visit, which we conduct, and we expect them and others to participate in that. But change doesn't happen with just 3 or 4 people. Change happens by engaging others in the work. So part of the training and the support is to help you build what we call a guiding coalition, additional staff, leaders, maybe even community members, and representative volunteers who can be part of this change, but they don't have to be part of every single one of these trainings. So we talk about quarterly meetings or bi-monthly meetings with them where you can key in and keep them and get their input, get their support, build buy-in, and ultimately get their involvement. We absolutely require leadership involvement. Lorena from Seniors in Service, so fortunate that we had their CEO, Robin Ingalls, participate in every session. Not every organization is able to have their CEO participate, but we want at least one senior leader who has influence over significant resources and strategy for the organization to participate. Without it, again, it relegates this to a program rather than an organization-wide strategy. We will share, actually, John, if you're able to just drop this link into the chat. Hopefully you've already been on this webpage because it's probably how you signed up for this webinar. But this is where Volunteer Florida has all of its resources, including the application for participation. So feel free to visit that often. And let me take a few moments to just anticipate a couple frequently asked questions. And the first one is actually I'm going to start with the one that's last on the list because I know it's the one that people always ask. How much does this cost? So let me share that. And I'm happy to say that thanks to the generosity and funding through Volunteer Florida, this entire initiative, which includes all of those things that I just shared, is available to Florida-based organizations for just $400, which is the cost of the diagnostic. Everything else, which is valued on the market essentially at between $12,000 to $15,000 per organization, 14 hours of thank you, Karen. We think that's amazing too. So the cost is only $400 to participate, as long as you fulfill all those other commitments. Everything else is funded through Volunteer Florida and its funding resources. So let me share that. Now let's go through the other questions. How long does it typically take? Technically, Service Enterprise nationally gives us 24 months from orientation to accreditation. But typically it's 12 to 16 months, 12 to 18 months tops. So we anticipate by kicking off in October, we will be able to get most, if not all, organizations accredited by the end of 2026, with some room to go into 2027 if we need to. Who should be involved and what is the time commitment? I've mentioned that we already have, and this is a downloadable document from that webpage as well, so you can go back and look at a little more details. I'm just going to say them briefly so I have time for other questions. We need a team of at least 3 individuals. We need at least one of them to be a senior leader. I always encourage organizations to consider including a volunteer on your team, even if you have a staff of 30. I love having volunteers involved. I think it brings the volunteer voice. So I've had teams involved from as few as 3 up to 8 or 10 individuals as a whole. But we want the core team to include the person who is most responsible for volunteer engagement, especially if it's a different person, a senior leader, and then a third person at least who is involved in volunteer engagement. But we also provide information like, at this session, it would be great to also have your HR director if he or she is not on the core team already. This one, it'd be great to have your CFO or someone who's involved in budgeting if they're not already on the team. What if someone can't attend one of the trainings? And Karen, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to talk about the SurveyMonkey in a moment, the application. What if someone can't attend one of the trainings? We say we expect everyone to participate in all of the trainings from the core team. We also live in the real world and know that people get sick, people have emergencies, people have other programs. This isn't the only thing your organization is doing. We do record the sessions, and we ask that folks who are on teams, please watch the recording and participate in meetings with your core team between training sessions so that you can be caught up. But it is a red flag to me if only one person is showing up at all the trainings. That is not a team effort. So that's the exception, but we really, no one will be kicked out if one person has to miss a training. Last year we had to reschedule a lot of the trainings with this cohort because there were a lot of weather crises. And we understand that, and some of our organizations work in disaster response. So, so we're reasonable, but we do expect everyone to make their best effort to participate in all of them. What if you have staff changes during the course of the program? Again, welcome to the real world. This happens in almost every cohort at some point, and we work with you as your coach to bring everyone up to speed, but that is also why we provide for each training session a recording, participant materials, a copy of the PDF of the slides, and we do our best to collaborate with you to bring people up to speed. Can you find out what's on the application? Karen, great question. Yes, you can scroll through the whole thing, but in 2 slides, I'm going to have a list of the types of questions that are asked. So stay tuned. And I think I answered the how much does it cost. So let's talk about the application. The application includes basic information about, your contact information, organizational information like your mission, budgets, county served. We ask a few brief questions about what are your current volunteer and staffing structure. We're not asking for an essay. I think we limit it to 200 words. We want to just get a sense of what are you already doing. And then what do you hope to achieve? What's your definition of success? Again, short. No, I think it's no more than 200 words that we ask for, and it can be 50 words if you want. We also want you to think through what are the potential challenges or obstacles that you might anticipate encountering. Naming those does not preclude you from participating. We want you to know, we want to know if this is an organization that can anticipate some challenges and think about how they might overcome them. And then what are some of the strengths that you bring to the table, and whom do you anticipate including on your team? So those are the types of questions, and I believe you can also scroll through the SurveyMonkey to see the specifics, but we will make available this PDF of the slides, I think, as well, so you can see those topics and prepare. Caitlin asks, is there a final project you need to do to gain accreditation? And how do you prove that you've reached 9 of the 12 required characteristics? Great question. At your diagnostic, so the short answer is there's not a final project, but instead it's an evidence-based or a portfolio-based accreditation process. So at your personalized diagnostic debrief, we share with you a blank service enterprise action plan, which I'm not going to pull up on the screen because it's going to make everyone worry, but it's basically a big Excel workbook, and one of the pages is your action plan with a line for each of the 12 characteristics, and under each of those 12 characteristics are a set of identified rubric standards, and throughout the course of the training, the coaching, in anticipation of the accreditation, we are working with you to fill out this action plan stating, oh, one of the rubric standards is we train staff to effectively engage volunteers. Great, we already do that. So let's put a line in there about how organization XYZ includes volunteer engagement in our annual staff training. And then we ask you to pull some evidence together in a separate folder, and we're going to share the agenda for that. So slowly you begin to populate, and we support you in populating this action plan. Some of those things might be, we don't do it yet, but in 2027, we're hoping to launch XYZ, and here's our plan for it. And then we use that in reviewing your application for accreditation, combine it with the results of our 2-hour site visit, and then presumably we, John and I, make a recommendation to the national organization that this particular organization in Florida is ready to accredit as a service enterprise. So I hope that answers that question. I'm going to keep talking and leave our contact information up on the screen while we field additional questions. And in the meantime, if you do need to leave, know that the formal part of this program is over, but the recording and I believe a PDF of these slides will be made available. And a friendly reminder that your action plan is due. Sorry, not your action plan. I'm stuck on action plans. Your application is due no later than August 29th. I would take a look at it and begin filling it out now, because while it isn't very daunting, it's not something that I think you can just sit down and do in 5 minutes. So with that, let's see. What is the cost if we are an organization that does work in Florida but is not based in Florida? The cost, John or Allie, please let me know if I'm misspeaking. The cost is $400 to participate as part of the Volunteer Florida cohort. If you are not based in Florida, I think that's a conversation you should have with our colleagues at Volunteer Florida. And if it's deemed that you're not eligible for this cohort, I'm happy to share information about how else you might be able to pursue accreditation, but I don't want to rule out participating in this cohort. So I'm going to suggest that you, Shannon, reach out directly to John, and here's his contact information about that, and he'll loop me in if I'm needed. Will we be able to receive a copy of the presentation to go over all the information? Yes, Malia. I'll work with John and Allie to put a PDF of these slides on the website. And let me see if there are any other questions. I'm hoping that, Michelle, if you have additional questions about volunteer systems. So I'll go back to this question. You had asked about volunteer systems that handle registrations, email capabilities for posting updates, etc. That's a very specific question about technology. And if your only question is about technology, then I'd say you can probably, with a lot less effort, get information about that than pursuing service enterprise accreditation. And both John and I can probably share. We don't endorse any one particular system, but I'm happy to share some resources and websites to look to for that tech side. But I, of course, want to ask the question, what's the strategy behind all of those tech needs? And would Service Enterprise help you identify what are some of the strategic needs or systems you might be able to address that then can be served by technologies? So, but there are a lot of ways to get information on tech, if I'm reading that question right, beyond this big commitment. And either John or I can help. John, anything else? I think, oh wait, here's one new. Can we apply to the RCAF and Service Enterprise at the same time? John, that's a question for you.
Yes, absolutely. Feel free to. That application is live, and those applications for RCAF are due next week, the 14th by 5 p.m. Eastern. So feel free to drop your application there. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to rcaf@volunteerflorida.org. But yes.
And Kristen asks a great question. Would Service Enterprise be able to guide an organization get set up with AmeriCorps? So I am nothing if I'm not direct and transparent. I'm going to tell you what Service Enterprise can do and what we don't do. Service Enterprise has successfully supported many organizations, including seniors in service, in best leveraging AmeriCorps, but it is not a program designed to help you with the specifics of AmeriCorps program implementation and all of that compliance piece and reporting. I have worked with many habitats across the country that have AmeriCorps members as part of their Service Enterprise team. I have worked with groups in Florida that, like Seniors in Service, engage in RSVP programs, but it is not we, for example, recognize that RSVP programs have their own handbooks. We would help an organization align those handbooks with handbooks that might serve non-AmeriCorps volunteers at their organization. So we can help you align practices, but it is not a program designed to help you launch an AmeriCorps program. It can walk alongside that, but I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver on that. There are other sources to help you get AmeriCorps set up. Thank you, Kristen. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for participating and staying on for this call. Those who are watching via recording, feel free to reach out with questions as well. And we look forward to reading applications in the coming weeks and seeing you out in the field. Thank you for everything you do every day. How can you gain access to this recording? It will be linked on that Volunteer Florida /Service Enterprise page. Glad this was helpful, and looking forward to seeing your information. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.